all over. Yeah. But that's cool. Thank you for coming.
Happy to be here.
They say it's the most realistic. Yeah, there are. Yeah.
Probably slide these back and get another row in for chairs. If you take it.
All right.
When you first.
Well, the league calls this one because it is such a complicated thing. And the first step is just simply educating people, which is why I'm here tonight, just to let people know what's at stake and why it is what it is. But ultimately, the goal is to have a constitutional amendment to get rid of it. Well, I want to talk about that.
Well, the idea is that Jeff has to educate so that when the country license that for people will learn about it. I don't think we're ready for it right now. Well, often, things happen on his life. Yeah. If somebody posted that, if you're recording
Yeah, about there. Yeah.
what it did to me, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, really good.
So I just turned it on, and that's what I'm getting. So it must be.
Oh, you're on the right page?
Yeah.
That's good.
He did.
We good?
Yes. I was 95% sure.
Do you want me to stick around until?
No, you can. I had it pulled up as well. I was just. I was 95% sure the link would work.
Okay.
But I'm glad it was.
Okay.
And it should work forever because there wasn't a set stream time, so that will work every time.
Perfect. Okay.
They were just like,
Well, we got started.
no. They didn't even want to hear from it. But, here's the thing about the presidential election, actually elect that was right. If I went to the house, we're missing that let's elect a governor using some let's divide the state up by representation and population and whatnot. Let's elect a governor by I would pick a language. That's the stupidest idea. It's like, okay, now you see, it was an idea, it was a conversation. It's going to be deeply in some teams, but they did, this was like, okay, just let us know.
It's kind of like the last video.
Yeah, everybody wanted to.
Are you gonna stay for the
Probably.
That's like 70s.
Yeah, well, I've been following him.
There's a couple.
I've been staying current with him. But, the thing is that the league is unabashedly nonpartisan. So, I used to be very careful when I raised this
So lately I
brand.
have knocked on doors and talked about our community and they're like, sorry. Because I don't.
I don't even put a yard sign on it.
Yeah.
Well, we loosened that up this summer too, allowed to ID.
Oh.
That changed without most recent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, I can't
Well, that's too bad.
yeah.
Well,
Kids,
I mean, I think
I
it's
think
given
the trip.
Right, I'm about to go to 19th and start.
hot, ready? Yep. That's, okay, it's Scottish.
Scottish.
You can go, yeah, but that, yeah, don't do that. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. But in Scotland, they do.
Okay, great.
They don't do it here, but in Scotland. They do.
Okay, perfect.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. I'm going to be your MC to start the evening because our programs person, Robin, is out, unfortunately, with a sore shoulder. So, you get me. Tonight, our special guest presentation is Jeff Badnock. It's Scottish, I'm told, with the Missoula League of Women Voters. Jeff grew up in Bozeman but crossed the Continental Divide to attend school at the University of Montana, where he did undergrad and grad work, earning a master's in public administration. After graduation, he worked at the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, serving as its director for 20 years. He has been engaged in many civic efforts over the years. He volunteers for the county elections office and serves as a docent at the beautiful new museum at UM. He has served on the boards of many nonprofits over the years. Currently, much of his time is spent working on the Electoral College project for the League of Women Voters, which is what brings him here tonight. Please welcome Jeff.
Thank you, everyone. I've got a scripted program that was provided by the League of Women Voters, but we will be able to take questions, so just make sure you get my attention and we can answer your questions. So welcome to our presentation on abolishing the Electoral College. This is a critical issue for our country, and this presentation will give you the reasons why the League of Women Voters supports a direct popular vote to elect our president and vice president. We'll start by sharing the basics. What is the Electoral College and what is the League of Women Voters' position on this method of electing our president? Next, we'll show the problems caused by the Electoral College, problems that a direct popular vote would easily solve. Then we'll review the top arguments given in favor of the Electoral College system and why each of those reasons are actually based on common myths. Finally, we'll explain what needs to be done to abolish the Electoral College, an amendment to the United States Constitution, and what you can do now to help make this happen. And we will do this all with plenty of time left to answer your questions, so please jot down your questions as we go through this so you can ask them at the end of the presentation. Hold on. First, what is the Electoral College? The Electoral College isn't a school or a building or a place. It's a group of 538 people who elect the president and vice president of the United States every 4 years. According to the United States Constitution, each state legislature gets to decide how their electors will be chosen. In the beginning of our country, state legislatures just picked the electors themselves. Over time, states started choosing electors by popular vote within their state. Each political party has their own slate of electors. When you vote in November, you're not voting directly for a presidential candidate. you are voting for a group of state electors from the candidate's political party who have pledged to give their electoral votes to that candidate. Each state gets a specific number of electors based on their congressional delegation. One elector for each U.S. senator and each U.S. representative. For example, Texas had 38 electoral votes in 2020, while Rhode Island had 4. The District of Columbia, although not a state, gets 3 electors. And of course, Montana gets 4. Importantly, the winner of the Electoral College is not whoever gets the most electoral votes. The winner must have a majority of the votes, over 50% of the votes to win. Currently, that's 270 electoral votes to win. If no candidate gets 270 votes, the U.S. House of Representatives chooses the president, with each state having just 1 vote, and the Senate chooses the vice president. Since 1970, the League's position has been that the direct popular vote method for electing the president and vice president is essential to representative government. The League of Women Voters believes, therefore, that the Electoral College should be abolished. The rest of this presentation will explain the many problems with the Electoral College that the League has identified. You may have heard about some of these problems, but there are also some that you may not have heard very much about. More recently, in 2010, the League of Women Voters of the United States added support for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact until the abolition of the Electoral College is achieved. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is an agreement among states to award all their electoral votes to whichever presidential ticket wins the overall popular vote in the 50 states plus DC. This is achieved through passing the NPVIC bill in enough states to add up to 270 electoral votes. And you can find out more about the compact on the League's website, or just Google it. It has been actually passed in some states, although not enough to make it effective. The rest of today's presentation will explain the many problems with the Electoral College that would be solved by abolishing the Electoral College. You may have heard about some of these problems, but there are also some that you may not have heard very much about. So let's jump into what's wrong with the Electoral College and how a direct popular vote for president will solve each and every one of these problems. To start, we're going back to the very beginning, for the Continental Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, during the long, hot summer of 1787. This was just after the American rebels won the independence from England, and the newborn country needed a new national constitution to determine how it would be governed. Each of the original 13 states could send delegates to represent them at this constitutional convention. 55 delegates attended, representing 12 of the 13 original states. The delegates included many famous men, including George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, John Adams, and Alexander Hamilton. These men faced the task of creating a new national system of government, and there were many fierce debates and arguments. How to elect the president was one of the very first arguments to arise, and it was the last one to be resolved through a compromise idea that ultimately came to be called the Electoral College. So why was the Electoral College created? One big reason is slavery. The Electoral College was a compromise designed to give Southern states more voting power in presidential elections based on counting each enslaved person as 3/5 of a free person. This 3/5 compromise had already been used to increase the number of representatives given to Southern states in the U.S. House of Representatives. Because the Electoral College is based in part on the number of members that each state has in Congress, it carried this infamous math into presidential elections. The rift between the North and South was not because there were more people living in the northern states than the southern states. In fact, as you can see from this chart, the northern and southern states had essentially the same total population in the late 1700s, about 1.8 million people each. However, the southern states had a much smaller voting population than the northern states because over a third of the southern states' population was enslaved. As a result, the southern states adamantly refused a direct popular vote for president. Before the convention, everyone expected that there would be battles between smaller versus larger population states. But as James Madison wrote about halfway through the convention, quote, "It seems now to be pretty well understood that the real difference of interest lies not between the large and the small, but between the northern and the southern states. The institution of slavery and its consequences form the line of discrimination." If the racism of the Electoral College had ended when slavery ended, we might not be having this conversation. But the Electoral College continued to silence black votes after the Civil War. Right after the Civil War, there was a brief period called Reconstruction when federal troops were stationed in the South to enforce newly won civil rights of formerly enslaved Americans. During Reconstruction, black men voted. Notice men, women weren't voting yet. And the first black representatives served in Congress. But then came the election of 1876, which was just a mess. Records are a bit murky, but it's pretty clear that Samuel J. Tilden won the popular vote for president over Rutherford B. Hayes. However, there were allegations of voter fraud, and in 4 states, Florida, North Carolina, Louisiana, and Oregon, both sides claimed a victory. As a result, Tilden didn't get a majority of the Electoral College. So the two parties came up with a compromise that traded newly awarded rights of black people to shore up the malfunctioning Electoral College. This compromise allowed Hayes to become president in exchange for the removal of federal troops from the South. The states of the former Confederacy were once again allowed to rule themselves, and they quickly started passing a series of laws commonly known as the Jim Crow laws. During the Jim Crow era, the voting rights of black people were systematically destroyed by state laws and local ordinances, like poll taxes and literacy tests. The Jim Crow era lasted for almost 100 years until the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So the Electoral College was created because of slavery, and the failure of the Electoral College in 1876 allowed racism to flourish. Unfortunately, the racist impact of the Electoral College didn't end with the Voting Rights Act. The Electoral College continues to suppress the voice of Black Americans. That's because states with a higher percentage of Black residents tend to have less power in the Electoral College, while states with whiter populations tend to have more power. For this analysis, Electoral College power is defined as the number of people it takes within a state for each electoral vote. If it takes fewer people to make up one electoral vote, the electoral power is stronger. For example, in the chart on the left, the states that are more than 85% white, it's about 400,000 people per each electoral vote. But in states that are more than 15% Black, higher than the national average, it's almost 650,000 people per electoral vote. If you do the math, 644,656 divided by 398,887, it means it takes 1.6 votes in states with high Black population to equal 1 vote in states with higher white populations. This is a simple analysis based on a 2020 census data. However, a more sophisticated statistical analysis done by William Blake from the University of Maryland in 2019 came to the same conclusion. His analysis of every election from 2000 on indicates the Electoral College has consistently awarded more votes per capita to states with wider populations. Again, the Electoral College may not be trying to mute Black voices, but it is having that impact, simply because of how our Black and white populations are distributed across the states. Perhaps this will naturally reduce over time, but a direct popular vote would immediately eliminate this racist impact by making every voter count as one vote, regardless of race or any other demographic. A lot of people these days are not aware of the racism that's been a part of the Electoral College from the beginning, yet they are aware of the other issues with the system. So what do most people dislike about the Electoral College? The problem we hear most from people is that the Electoral College turns losers into winners. 5 times in our history, the Electoral College has awarded the presidency to candidates who lost the popular vote. This happened 3 times in the 1800s and twice this century, in 2016 and 2000. A direct popular vote for president would ensure that the candidate who gets the most votes from the people would actually become the president. Another problem is that the Electoral College violates the principle of one person, one vote. It makes some votes count more than others, depending on where the voter happens to live. That's because the number of electoral votes given to a state isn't exactly proportional to its population. No matter how many people live in a state, it gets 2 electoral votes based on its 2 senators. So voters from smaller states have their votes weighted more heavily in the Electoral College than votes from larger states. For example, you can see in the table on the left that 1 vote in Wyoming counts as much as almost 4 votes in Florida. Wyoming has 3 electoral votes, or 1 electoral vote for every 192,000 people. Florida is a bigger state, and it has 29 electoral votes. That's 1 electoral vote for every 743,000 people in Florida. So if you do the math, 743,000 divided by 192,000, in the Electoral College, it takes nearly 4 popular votes in Florida to equal 1 popular vote in Wyoming. This plays out in other small and large state matchups like Wyoming, Vermont, or Alaska, whose electoral votes count as much as 3 or 4 votes in states like Florida, Texas, and California. A fundamental principle of the United States is that 1 person has 1 vote. This is the standard for every other election in this country, and it should be 1 person, 1 vote for our presidential elections. And that's exactly how it would be in a direct popular vote for president. Regardless of how many states are weighted in the Electoral College, we all know by now that only a few states really matter in presidential elections. These are the so-called swing states, where the outcome of the vote is considered to be up for grabs. The rest of the states are considered safe states, where the feeling is that the election result is obvious. The map here shows the swing states from the 2020 election. Top 6 swing states are in dark purple: Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida. Then there were another 7 swing states shown in lighter purple. Together, these swing states got almost all the TV ads and campaign events. In fact, 100% of the TV ads and 98% campaign events for the 2020 general election presidential campaigns were in these states. They get all the candidates' attention, and even worse, that means they have much greater influence over the candidates' policy positions. With direct election by popular vote, candidates would be forced to pay attention to the whole country, not just a handful of swing states. All 50 states and the District of Columbia would require consideration from presidential candidates. The Electoral College not only makes some voters matter more than others, it gives people a reason not to vote. It actually decreases voter turnout in the so-called safe states. Data from 2016 and 2020 proves this. In the graph, you can see that the percentage of eligible voters who cast a vote for president was significantly lower in safe states compared to the swing states. These differences may seem small, only 6 or 7 percentage points, but that translates into 15 million registered voters in non-swing states who chose not to vote in 2016, and 22 million registered voters who chose not to vote in 2020. That's more than enough to change the outcome of a presidential election. This is a nonpartisan issue affecting both major political parties. If I'm a Republican voter in a blue state or a Democratic voter in a red state, I feel like my vote for president never counts, so why bother? On the flip side, Republican voters in red states and Democrat voters in blue states feel like their party doesn't really need their vote. So millions of people just don't vote. A direct popular vote for president will increase voter turnout by making every vote count and count equally. As we saw during the 2020 election and its aftermath, the Electoral College also leaves our presidential elections more vulnerable to manipulation and even outright fraud. The Electoral College provides partisan operatives with a roadmap for overturning election results. In 2020, that created a desire to find an additional 38 electoral votes instead of over 3.5 million votes if the winner were chosen by popular vote. And the Electoral College showed where it would be easiest to gain those electoral votes by, quote, finding, quote, fewer than 43,000 ballots in just 3 states, Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. That's all it would have taken to overturn the results of the 2020 election. So those are 6 major problems with the Electoral College, and each of them would be fixed by using direct popular vote to elect the president. You may be convinced, but not everyone is. After outlining all these problems with the Electoral College, we hear from folks who say, even if all this was true, here's why the Electoral College still makes sense. We'd like to walk through the most common reasons why some people continue to support the Electoral College. These are not just fringe theories, by the way. These are the main points that supporters of the Electoral College use to defend this undemocratic system. And none of them stand up to scrutiny. They're actually myths that do not stand up to the facts. So let's bust the facts now. Myth number 1. Without the Electoral College, our presidents would all be chosen by a couple of big states like California and New York. In fact, in 2020, Joe Biden needed votes from at least the 31 highest population states to beat Donald Trump's 74.2 million votes. This is a chart of the votes for Joe Biden in 2020 listed by states, going from the highest population state, California. Adding all the Biden votes in the 10 largest states, California, Texas, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, and Michigan, the result is only 44.5 million votes for Biden, far short of what he needed to win. Add Biden votes from the next 15 largest states, and he still only had 66 million votes. In fact, you have to add the Biden votes in 6 more states, a total of 31 states, for him to have beat Donald Trump. In fact, Biden received 81 million votes, so he got additional votes from the remaining 19 states, plus DC. So all the states had a role in that outcome. It is simply mathematically impossible for an election by popular vote to be determined by just the largest states. The fact is that direct election by popular vote means that votes from most or all states would be needed to win the presidency. And every vote would count, and count the same, no matter where the voter lives. After seeing these facts about states, believers in the Electoral College will then bring up a similar myth, that without the Electoral College, our presidents would be chosen by a few big cities, like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. Once again, statistics tell a different story. These pie charts show that the percentage of voting age adults who live in big cities. As seen on the first chart on the left, the combined voting age population of New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago is just 5% of the national voting age population. That's certainly not enough to decide an election. So we expanded to the top 10 cities, those with over 1 million residents. And that adds up to just 8% of the voting age population. Even when we went to the 50 biggest cities, they make up just 15% of the voting age population in the country. That's about the same as the size of the rural population. There just aren't enough people living in big cities to decide our president on their own. Most people, 71%, in this country live in smaller towns and suburban areas. It is simply mathematically impossible for an election by popular vote to be determined by just the largest states or the largest cities. Once again, direct election by popular vote would ensure that every person is equally represented regardless of where they live. Myth number 3, abolishing the Electoral College will only benefit Democratic candidates. To bust this myth, let's look at the 2004 presidential election, the Bush-Kerry election. On the left is the Electoral College map of the 2004 election, where George W. Bush won over John Kerry with 3 million more popular votes than Kerry. The map on the right shows how close George W. Bush came to winning the popular vote, but losing the electoral vote. Can you spot the difference? It's just one state. Tell what it is? Ohio. If John Kerry had received only 119,000 more votes in Ohio, he would have won the Electoral College and the election, even though Bush would still have had nearly 3 million more popular votes. The fact is that the Electoral College can either hurt either of our two major political parties. This is a nonpartisan issue. Perhaps the biggest obstacle to eliminating the Electoral College is just plain pessimism. Many people feel that the Electoral College will never be abolished because it would take a constitutional amendment to do it. It's never going to happen is a comment we hear all too often. What we need to do is defeat the defeatism. Here's a timeline showing the dates that all constitutional amendments were ratified. The Bill of Rights on the far left, shown as just one bar because those were all passed at once. You can see that our history includes flurries of constitutional activity punctuated by long periods of inactivity. There was a period of 60 years between the first two clumps, then another gap of 43 years. Then there were 18 years between the amendments of the 1930s and those of the 1950s and 60s. Then a gap of 21 years until the 27th Amendment in 1992. And it's been 34 years since then. What distinguishes these periods of constitutional activity? They tended to be periods of great national political activity where citizens were feeling that our democracy was in crisis, where the demand for change across our society was persistent and loud. There was the period after the Civil War, the Progressive era at the turn of the 1900s, and the Civil Rights era of the 1950s and 60s. We seem to be in the middle of another period of political activity, of demand for change. Only time will tell, but the level of engagement we are seeing now and the genuine concerns about the resilience of our democracy are remarkable. Now let's focus on our goal, abolishing the Electoral College by amending the Constitution. What will it take to get us there? Well, our ultimate goal is a constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College and use a direct popular vote to elect our president. This is how we amend the Constitution. First, a bill to propose an amendment needs to pass both the U.S. House and the Senate by 2/3 vote. That's not easy, nor should it be. Then the proposed amendment needs to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures. That's 38 states. Again, not easy, but it's been done 27 times and we can do it again. Please note that it doesn't require, and the League does not support, a constitutional convention to accomplish this. The usual amendment process outlined here would do the job of abolishing the Electoral College. Congress took action between 1969 and 1970 to abolish the Electoral College. There was a ton of momentum at that time because of the 1968 election, where a third-party candidate, George Wallace, got 46 votes in the Electoral College. Both Democrats and Republicans were worried that Wallace's popularity could have resulted with neither Richard Nixon nor Hubert Humphrey getting the required 270 votes in the Electoral College to win the election. A Gallup poll at the time shows a whopping 81% of Americans supported abolishing the Electoral College. And a bill to amend the Constitution passed the House of Representatives by a huge bipartisan margin, 338-70. However, the bill died in the Senate when it was filibustered by Southern Democrats who feared that their states would lose power in presidential elections because they're traditionally low voter turnout. Similar bills have been introduced as recently as 2021, but there's been no vote on these bills. We believe this issue lacks momentum because of the defeatist attitude that it's never going to happen. So that's what we need to change. We need to change and we need to gain momentum. The League of Women Voters is uniquely positioned to empower voters through education and advocacy at the local, state, and national levels. That's what we do. We engage with voters, provide them with information and education they need about elections and issues. And then, armed with this education, the League can activate voters to bring this momentum to Congress when the time is right. I hope you're totally convinced that we need to abolish the Electoral College so that the person who gets the most votes wins our national presidential elections. Let's start with the easiest thing. Just talk about it. Tell your family and friends what you heard today about the harm the Electoral College is doing to our country. Feel free to use your own words or use our crib sheet for ideas. Your goal is to tell at least 3 people, but more is even better. Another easy thing to do is post on social media about the League's One Person, One Vote campaign. You can make up your own posts if you're good at that, but you can also download posts at the League's website, www.lwv.org/OPOV. And finally, you can arrange to give this presentation to other groups. If you're a member of the League of Women Voters, you can give it yourself. And if you're not a member and you want to have this presentation, I'll take it anywhere. Let's just say in Western Montana. The presentation and script are available to all League members, and our committee will make it easy for you. We'll provide you with the materials, training, and support if you want. Just email us at abolishelectoral@gmail.com. If you're not a League member, maybe you should be. You can email us at abolishelectoral@gmail.com, and we'll find a League member to give this presentation to your group. That's it. 3 easy things you can do now to spread the word that we need to abolish the Electoral College and elect our president by popular vote. Thank you for your attention. We're happy to take questions. Yes.
Well, I looked up one of the questions I have it. Puerto Ricans vote.
Puerto Ricans are United States
But
citizens.
they do not have any electoral college votes. Is that
They do
correct?
not.
Washington DC, or the District of Columbia, votes in our elections, and they do have, but they do not have any, or they're elected, they don't have elected representatives that have a vote in Congress.
They cannot vote. They have a representative at the DC.
And their population is larger than that of Rhode Island.
It's larger than Montana. Puerto Rico's larger than Montana. Yeah. Yeah. And if we had direct election, Puerto Rican vote would be the same as a Montana vote. And a DC vote would be the same. Anybody else? It's really a crazy, crazy system when you think about it. Oh, yes.
How do we get that kind of bipartisan support in Congress for this again?
Well, I'm gonna go talk to the Republicans next. I think part of it is questions. And I think if we ask candidates their position, make it an issue that they have to talk about, take a stand on, that generates more interest, gets people asking more questions. Why did the candidate get asked about the Electoral College? Well, I heard this presentation and here's the problem with the Electoral College. It's a conversation starter. And that's what it's going to take is, but if we have candidates being asked their views on this, that will get the attention. That will get the attention it deserves. Yes.
So, and this is just confirming when you said that the process is 2/3 House, 2/3 Senate, then sent to the state legislatures for 3/4.
Yep.
There's no role of the executive branch, like signing off on a normal bill, correct? Since he or she would be, potentially a candidate.
If it's 2/3 in each house,
Yeah.
that's a veto proof.
That's veto proof
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
Just confirming
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It really is goofy, and when you really wrap your head around all these things, you ask yourself, why does this persist? It just, the basic unfairness of it all is kind of abhorrent. No,
Maybe after the midterms, we can pull it off.
yes,
I'm gonna make one more comment. I
Okay.
moved here from Iowa 4.5 years ago, and I had the opportunity to participate in multiple presidential caucuses over the years, and I got the opportunity to entertain presidential candidates in my home and visit, you know, and travel with some of them across the state and do that. And you made me feel guilty when I saw Iowa up there, because we did get up close, and I always thought to myself, this really isn't fair.
Yeah.
These people aren't going to other places, though this is a big country and it's hard to go everywhere, but they were all concentrated in Iowa for months.
our local league has a committee that's on this issue, and we frequently hear speeches from national experts on this issue. And here's one that's not in our presentation, but I think is fun to wrap your head around. It's called wasted votes. So, for the purpose of discussing this, imagine that it's a state that has 100 voters in it. And under the electoral college system, you need to have 51 votes to get all that state's electoral votes, right? Okay, so if you get 51 votes, the 49 votes of the other party are wasted. What's more, if you get 50, let's say you got 80 votes, 29 votes that you have are wasted because you didn't need them. So when you think about wasted votes and how this system makes it so winner take all, except in Maine and Nebraska, winner takes all, millions and millions and millions of people are being effectively disenfranchised from voting for the president. Yeah.
So, like Suzette disclosed, what her background was, I was a reporter, I was a political reporter for years, and I was traveling press. I covered presidential campaigns, traveling press, and stuff like that. One of the things that I found as a reporter when I was doing this was that a lot of people, there's cultural differences. And so in states that, like the Southern Democrats, that really do not want this change, there are people in the West that also don't want to change.
Right.
It's not just about civil rights, it's also about cultural issues in West versus East. I think one of the most effective arguments you have here is about the big cities. I've never heard that before. That's new.
Yeah.
And I think that's an effective argument that it's really not big cities.
It's a myth. Yeah.
But there still is, you know, power to Montana. We're a small state, we have more power by having this system in some ways. So I think you're gonna have an argument, you've gotta make that argument to some of the smaller states that are favoring this, like why they should do this. I don't think this presentation necessarily effectively does that for people that are worried about that loss of power.
Yeah.
Just a
No, I
2
understand.
cent input.
That's why I'm appealing to their sense of fairness. One more.
Scott, I'm sorry for asking twice.
That's all right.
So does the League of Women Voters, or do you personally have any thoughts on how something like ranked choice voting would interact with college? You know, is that equally a good idea, less of a good idea, et cetera?
I don't think that the leagues has a position. We don't have a position on that. I've looked at it. It's very complicated and it's very hard to explain to people. I mean, I'm a graduate of political science program, so I understand it and I understand why people want to use it. It makes sense to them, but it's not something that's part of our presentation. Yeah. Well, thanks. Now talk about it. Talk about it.
All right, thanks, Jeff. I'll just leave the microphone. Thanks, Jeff, and the Missoula League of Women Voters. We really appreciate the work you're doing. We have about 18 minutes until Matt's presentation, but Matt Raines is here, right there in the back. We have Matt. He's running for Congress for Montana's 1st Congressional District. He's here to speak for 30 minutes for us beginning at 7, so in order to make sure the folks that want to come to that get here. We're going to wait, but if you want to talk to him, feel free. He's over there.
Q&A.
Let's just wait till 7. Yeah, but like if folks want to talk to you, great. Facilities, restrooms are over here. There's snacks over here. And also, Julie is over here. She is our notary tonight. So those that are filling out your forms to be precinct people, we brought forms there, and then she's here to watch you sign your name and stamp your paper.
The deadline for those forms is the 17th.
It
Also,
starts the 17th and goes till March 4th. Yes.
and they also have a constitutional amendment for basically trying to make sure that we have nonpartisan judicial elections in Montana. So if, come see me, if you have not signed a petition, we've had it that way for 90 years. The last legislature tried to change it. This is a constitutional amendment, which would then get passed and can basically ensure that we have nonpartisan judicial elections in our state. Correct.
Okay, we'll reconvene in 15 minutes.
Good, glad you liked it. I was just wondering, is there any spillover conversations about racism, black people? I'm not sure most people are really aware of that long history. And so virulent the feelings have been over the years. People in the South understand that. Yeah, but I was wondering, has there any discussion presentations that spill over the South? Just so they don't have to tell their buddies. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it was just amazing the night before the night of you've never seen such an excitement with rich people in that country. So I'm in Georgia. My father left us. And I'm sitting in my uncle's Christmas, and my uncle says to me, excuse my language, I never thought I would see a day in this country with election.
Not those guys. So things are changing. And one of the things that message is getting out. to the federal constitution. I think we should elect a governor using our own state electoral college. Hell with an elected governor. We need an electoral college. They would laugh me out. They would say that is the stupidest idea. And you say, well, see, the stupid idea is federalism. Yeah, yeah. Well, and the league is proud to say that we are also instrumental in getting women the right to vote.
Well, I'm gonna share this with my Iowa friends and say, hey, you gotta do this.
Well, and just tell your Iowa friends, find the nearest League of Women Voters.
I'll find out if they've already submitted.
Oh, I bet they have, because one of the groups that sponsor these online scholars talking about the cause violence, they got them now. So there's the league is gung ho on this in Ohio, in Iowa. Good.
Thank you so much.
Also, thank you for
I gotta get up in
I was doing some research.
PetSmart
Oh,
parking lot.
okay.
And I was
Videos of him running against John.
there a couple weeks ago,
with
and I went back today, and they, yes, yeah.
I'm just a volunteer. Here's an interesting story about that. In the primary, I lost by 3 votes. And that close automatically recount. So all the mail-in ballots, and we got dozens of people counting ballots. And they get to the end, and what they discovered was there were 50 ballots that, in the course of putting up ballots, they changed the order of the candidates so nobody gets the bias first in line. So it changes. Well, there were 50 ballots. The printer had to change the code with the change the name. So I got some of Luann Crowley's votes. She got some of mine. I got some of Angus' votes. He got some of mine. And between the 3 of us and the other 2 people who were running, those 50 votes, that all got cleaned up. And so when they went back, because they were paper ballots, they were able to go and see what the voter actually wanted. It wasn't counted, it doesn't rely on the code. I ended up losing by 10.
That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
You were very prompt. I got here, thought I'd be here, so I'll talk for a few minutes. Wasting, you're already in. So if I'm a member, not for legal, so how is it that you get that presentation? That's a great presentation.
Well, we have the slides. We have it, I have it, and I can share it with you, and I can share the script.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even if you read it,
Well, that's the other thing, is the league has some
last name, first name. Not double dipping over here. Every time I have a
the league has some rules about you don't for non-partisan. I mean, you understand, and I mean, I get them in the footnote about Montana having 4 electoral votes. That was a fact. It affected presentation with illustrative.
You're doing good work. It's good to see you. Have you signed this petition for?
You signed me up with the
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I was there.
I can't believe. I know. There's a lot.
You've got a lot of
Today
people.
is the 11th. Yeah. Thank you very much for signing this. Oh boy. Oh, it's insane. It's like this is like just plain whack-a-mole. So, oh no, we've done it for 90 years. Oh, now let's change it. And there are people who refuse to sign it and say, oh no, I want them to declare. And I'm going, oh my God, we've gotten so partisan. You can't even have judges being on. It's insane. Yeah, exactly. Well, and they closed the issues. I said behind this, I said, do you really believe partisan politics belongs in our tradition. That's the problem we're having with the Supreme Court right now. We basically have had it hijacked because of the Republican Party refusing to bring up a vote with, and I can blame the woman who refused to retire when she knew she was, even though she did great things, but even then, there was enough time. But they wouldn't allow it to be funded, so that's why we have this. I'm Steve McCarthy. Hi. Glad to meet you. Good. Well, part of my research was watching him debate John Indian back in 2005. Yeah. That was all very good. I've come to the firm conviction where when all is said and done, it comes down to the virtue, the ethics of our business. Exactly. The character, the quality of the character. My God, I would have been so lucky forever. I agree with you, and yet we are now seeing what happens when you have unfit candidates not let him in office. And he is so unfit, he should be impeached as a traitor. Yeah. Well, and he's surrounded himself. It's corruption. Somebody said there are three things that lead to revolution. One is you have to have autocratic leaders strong, you have to have massive corruption, and you have to have disparity. Well, we've got those three, and I hope the midterm elections, if they're not stolen, if we even have them, because of the federal impeachment. Yeah. Yeah, because it's basically if you, before it was basic oil prices, yeah, basic tax on it. Now it's tariffs. And it's going to cost them. So Russia and China, it's a big deal. Yeah. To have a dysfunctional America. I have a friend who's going to Cuba, and he says, we're making a big mistake. I know, they're just waiting in the wings to see if we can strangle the Cuban economy as we're attempting to do, because now Venezuelan oil is being cut off. They would vote to cheer. I'm now retired, so I have more time to do things like this. So good for you. Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome.
but sometimes, yeah. I hate going to Zoom meetings, but that's something that, because, yeah, no, my wife did stuff, yeah, me too. I like to socialize. Yeah. I know some of these.
Okay, everybody, thanks for being here tonight. The next portion of our evening, we're going to hear from Matt Raines, congressional candidate for Montana's first congressional district, the Western District. So please give a hand for Matt Raines.
Thank you, everyone. I'll start with my background. I assume there's a few people here from my State Valley. And so, fourth generation rancher, grew up in the 70s, family ranch was back in the 1800s. And then went to West Point, was captain in the military, flew Black Hawks, and served in Iraq. After that, transitioned and became a humanitarian photographer. Traveled over 60 countries, most of them third world. Did projects in Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Kurdistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan. And then in Myanmar, if you guys have heard about the Rohingya genocide, it's basically Buddhists attacking Muslims. I was the first foreign photographer in 2012 when that kicked off. I just happened to be in Thailand, heard about these refugees. I went over there, pushed into some remote areas of concentration camps where they had pictures of their houses being burned and the camps themselves. And so ended up doing conferences in Saudi Arabia and LA based on that work. And then after that, I had a 10-year-old West Point engineering degree I had not used. I figured I probably should or become moot. And so came back to the States and took a job inspecting power plants. I would go around the country. I do inspections of about $800,000 to $1 million with repair findings. I give those to Boilermakers, let them go in and fix it. During that time, I got my MBA from Washington University in St. Louis, and that's where I met my future wife. She had a horse, I had a horse ranch, and so I convinced her to come back to Montana. And so we raised horses and hay on the ranch,
And we have about 30 head of horses. We have a stud that runs barrels down in Texas, and we try to do about 10 to 12 foals. So that's the operation there. 2019, I was in the primary when Kathleen Williams was running. Great primary. It was the full state. And so I was in about 6 months. And then by January, she was knocking out of the park. We met in Bozeman, had coffee. I endorsed her step aside to give her the best chance to beat Rosenberg. I thought so too. And with that, Walt Schweitzer from Montana Farmers Union, he'd seen me kind of on that campaign trail, and he had an idea in Havre area, doing a meat processing co-op. And so he brought me on board as project lead for Montana Meat Processing Co-op, which has been a phenomenal, it's USDA facility, powered by ranchers and farmers in Montana. And so we've had a lot of ranchers who have been able to start their own retail business based on this facility. So yeah, and the thing with that is we want to bring the next generation back. And just raising animals isn't even done anymore. And so having that additional revenue stream is vital to our family farmers and ranchers. With that, he didn't want to lose me after we got that up and going, so I became his chief of staff. And that was the last 4 years, just kind of being Walt's right-hand man, advocating for the ranchers and farmers across the board. So that brings me to this year, and what we have going on, the attack on our democracy. Montana's been, our delegation is not there about Montana. But I'm concerned about the 2028 elections. And we absolutely need to flip this seat red to blue right now, this cycle, in order to put at least one body of government in DC that can stand up to this and keep them in check. And so that's really created the urgency of getting into this race. And so that's my background. Usually at this point it's one-on-one.
Would you support direct elections? You just heard that presentation.
So, yes, absolutely. Every person's vote should count, must count. That is the right way to do it. It's a tough pitch because you put Wyoming on there, you didn't put Montana.
Yeah.
And that is the issue because it was set up to give more weight and voice to the smaller rural states.
Exactly.
And so that is where how do you convince Montanans to belittle our overall weight in order to do the right thing, to give everybody a fair and equal vote. So yeah, and it does always frustrate me where it's an all or nothing idea, except you're saying in Maine, is it Iowa? Nebraska. Where they do actually split it. I've never liked that. Because, but yeah, so that is my take there. I've had a lot of debates. One of my great buddies at West Point, he was a political genius, and so he was big into that too. But the one thing that I don't know, I've had going around campaigning, talking to everybody, there's a lot of lessons and things that I like to kind of share on what I've learned. And one of the things that somebody's usually right away be like, tell me about policy. And I kind of want people to check fire on that because the reason that we have the Congress we have right now, the reason that we have the Republicans we have right now, the administration, is they can sweet talk anybody with policy. Those are sweet words. And you can say anything you want. The one thing I really want everyone to start asking, this is what Trump's never going to wish for, talk about character, talk about integrity. What's a person's moral ethics? What's that based in? If you start looking at all your candidates and deciding like what made you you, the policy will be there. But if you lead with policy and you don't care about the character and integrity, that policy means nothing. That is changeable. That is viable.
And so I do really, kind of push back on that because, I've earned my stripes the hard way. I put my life on the line in Iraq for the military. In Afghanistan, I used to like travel through Taliban towns. And you'd have to go during prayer hour because they'd all be in the mosque and you could drive through it safely. And then in Myanmar, I mean, I had kids, I mean, they were like young 20s, police pull guns on me because I was taking pictures of destroyed mosques. To me, that builds character. And to me, that is the kryptonite to Ryan Sinke. He can sweet talk everything, but when he is held accountable for who he is and what he's done and what he stands for, he doesn't want me on that stage. I am the type of person that he can't answer for his decision making, his judgment against somebody who's really taking that part. And so I do always ask people, like, consider that when you are assessing your candidates. But we've got great candidates. I'm not knocking that in any way, shape, or form, but do the deep dive in that first. And then, yeah, I promise if you love their character, you'll love their policy. All right, we got like 6 questions at one time. We'll start over here and we'll work around this way. Did you have?
In your, if this is maybe antithetical to what you just said, but in your experience with working with farmers, are they starting to get the message that the Trump administration is no friend of theirs?
The Argentinian beef thing was the first, because my family's Republican. Like we're tied in. My ranch has pretty much, been Republican. And it was the first time that I saw people go on social media, die Meg, that were given the WTF with the Argentine beef thing. And the reason I'll say, like, to back that up, the reason why, it had nothing to do with the exports. We got plenty of beef that leaves. It was the implication that their box beef could come into our system, mix in with our beef, and it was one and the same. That was a slap in the face for our ranchers. And then the other thing, which I don't know if it was intentional or completely tone deaf by the administration, is ranchers live their entire life on one thing: cattle prices in October. That's when all the calves that were like born January, February, March go north. And he announced that in October and destroyed the market. And so, like I said, if it was intentional just to give some people some cheap calves or whatever they thought they were really doing, yeah, it really pissed them off. And so, now, Republicans are very, very good at their game. They have started to fix those cracks and those bridges, and they will talk policy and sweet talk everyone back into being on their side. And if they don't do anything, they'll do a 180 whenever they decide that Ryan Zinke's been reelected. All right, everything that he promised us is gone. With that, with Republicans being very good. So what do I mean by that? I was born in 1980. Since I was born, we have had 29 races federally for the Senate and the House in Montana that have either been open or a Republican was holding. So if you just take out the Democrat holding, 29 races in Montana since I was born. How many of those do you think Democrats have won? 3. Okay. With that, I'll let you know this. Melcher, Pat Williams, and Max Baucus won their seats of the contested race in the 70s. So take them out. Since I was born, we have won 1 federal race in an open or a held by a Republican. They, like, the statistical anomaly in that, like, it's not 3%, they should have won, because if everyone remembers 2006, Tester wasn't supposed to win. He wasn't supposed to make it to the primary. John Morrison was. And he made it through, and we had a senator for 18 years. So, I really highlight that. Not that it's unwinnable, But when you look at your candidates, 2006 gave us a blip to learn from. I would much rather right now be trained nurses. I've done some really cool shit in my life. I don't need to go be a congressman. I'm content. But I'm so scared of 2028. I'm in this race because I can do what happened in 2006. And it is so vitally important that we flip this seat now to protect us from 2028 that I got into this race. I mean, our country is being threatened. ICE just less than a year ago was just in Oregon. And now they're everywhere, killing people, killing Americans. Like, we have to flip this seat. And so, yeah, it's Democrats, we love our primaries. We love our primaries. And the GOP loves to win. So, the reason I bring that up is June is too late. We need everyone, and I'm not just find your candidate. I am good with that. Find that person that you were like, oh my God, this is the person that I want to see in Congress for the rest of my life. And put your weight behind them. Jump on that bandwagon and charge forward. We can't wait till June because Zinke started in November. I consider his 60-minute article when he was on TV, the first time I've seen him on TV in years, a couple weeks after I got into the race, just by chance. He's been campaigning since then, and we have to be. So, I really, really ask that you guys pick your candidate, whoever it is, and really get behind it. Let's get them strength and runway now, so they can take off and they can fly and they can, go toe-to-toe with Zinke. So, I know, I'm such a downer.
My questions. We'll get you up with these questions. This is a practical, operational question for you, all right?
Okay.
You're right, we gotta flip this seat. The task is getting people who voted for Zinke to now elect a Democrat. So what do you see as the low-hanging fruit in issues, communications? What's the offering for these people from Crazy Town? Maybe it's you in June, maybe it's someone else. What are the topics and issues that are appealing to those people saying, hey, yeah, we know you voted for Zinke, now it's time to vote for the good guy. What are we talking about?
To me, it's not issues, it's honesty and integrity. The Meg is the Meg. Like, they're voting right. We want the swing voters to consider somebody that they can trust and believe in. You're not going to woo them with the issue that's going to sway them all. It's Tester won in this district against Sheehy. It was margin, very slim, but he still got 19,000 more votes than Monica Trinell did here. And Monica ran a great race. She worked her tail off. Like, she raised money. It was a great, great race. But he had that je ne sais pas, that something. Sorry. They got 19,000 votes. Monica only needed half of those votes and she would have won. She would have got all of them, she would have won by 10,000. And to me, and what's been successful for Democrats, when you put a moderate Democrat, a rancher, military, something out there, they can get those swing votes. They can do it. I can do it. I know I do. That's why I'm in this race. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
So I just want to start traveling around the state. I had a chance to meet your former high school teacher, and she said, and it's a direct quote.
Which one?
I'm forgetting the name, but I'll tell the story. She said that in high school, you had more leadership quality than most of the politicians in DC do now. So I think that's a very strong endorsement. But Sam's question is a little bit about policy, but I guess what specifically in your campaign strategy, apparatus, the way you go out and campaign, how are you going to reach those voters who otherwise aren't going to hear a Democrat's message?
Okay, so now we have talked about character, we talked about all that. So yes, so the issues. are important. And so what we are running on, what I'm running on for this district absolutely is housing. Affordability is the big topic, but housing right now is so astronomically out of whack. A 20, 30-year-old is probably spending 2/3 of their wages or salary to pay for rent. A healthy ratio is 1/3. So 2/3, that means they're either gonna have 4 or 5 roommates, because when you pay utilities and fuel and everything else, like, you can't live. You don't have anything else to live on to go do anything fun. So that's how they're getting priced out. And we used to be like, we're losing our next generation because, they don't want to come back and work as hard as us. We're losing them because they just can't afford to live in the communities they were born and raised in. And so housing is absolutely the first issue to address there. With that, for our economy, the knee-jerk tariffs, tariffs are one thing, but the way that this administration does them, we've lost some markets for Montana that are going to take years, decades to win back. And then, most importantly for all of us is the healthcare, the attack on healthcare. And so, Medicaid's always going to, like, this administration hates Medicaid, it hates SNAP. It's asinine what they're coming after. The big beautiful bill, losing 6 or 7 rural hospitals. We absolutely, like Montana, if we want that next generation to return, I'm 45 minutes from a hospital. You're not gonna have a couple that wants to have kids. Like, that's not acceptable anymore. And so we don't just need to keep our current healthcare system on life support. Like, we need to find ways to beef it up. And the telehealth is great, but there's a lot of things that you need. You need a nurse, a PA. You need somebody that's there that can actually help diagnose, assess. And so we really have to find a way to beef up our healthcare system in Montana.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's gonna tie into healthcare. According to a state study, by the year 2030, state of Montana, 30% of the population is gonna be over the age of 65. And there will be more people in the state of Montana over the age of 65 than 18 and under.
Yeah.
That population is facing, nobody's done anything about Social Security for years. Republicans have wanted to privatize it. And my daughter, who's going to be turning 58, says to me, there's not gonna be any Social Security for me. And it may run out before I, pass.
I was actually kind of thinking about that because I remember it was really like the Bush administration time. We could fix the Social Security head on just by pulling from the fund,
Raise the cap.
You could raise the cap and just a slight change on the
That-
percent, get it for 75 years.
Yeah, it's when Republicans want to privatize it.
Yeah.
That they really go after it's failing and it's going to. No, if we just get our shit together, we can fix that. We're a big enough country, we can do that. Now, going back to healthcare on the bigger scene, I've had universal healthcare since I was 18. I've had it in the military. When I traveled, I went into a hospital in Spain. I was about to travel into Africa. I was like, I need to model my vaccinations. I met with them, they gave me the vaccination. I'm like, who do I pay? They look I have 2 heads. That is the right way. We need to transition and move. And we've already got Medicaid and Medicare, and we've got the VA system. We just need to figure out ways to fill in the gap and build up. It's like renewables and everything. We have to keep our compass pointing north to where we want to be, and we just keep pushing there. And that's, the insurance companies are the ones that are preventing us from solving that one. Okay, man, I don't know.
We talked before, so like you, I also served in Afghanistan and did multiple tours, so.
Speak up.
Okay, hi, can you hear me? Okay, like you, I also served, and I know Operation Enduring Freedom pretty well. One of the things that, we talked about when we talked was highlighting certain pluses in your profile and your personality, and I think that would work potentially with voters here. One of them is the fact that you're a veteran, and we have so many people here who are veterans, but the other part, and I didn't know this about you, was that co-op. I happened to go to the Ag and Ranch Conference this year. 62% of the farmers and ranchers in Montana, that's the average age of most people in this state. The suicide rates of farmers and ranchers are 5 times higher than the suicide rates of veterans in the state of Montana. And ranching is dying, and the future is going to be co-ops, especially young people that are coming into those co-ops. What is your plan to reach voters where you're talking about that at personal level? Because you do have a connection in that level, and are you reaching out to those voters in that way? I think that's low-hanging fruit. That's point number 1, 2. And number 3 is the fact that none of our current federal representatives are on any of the ag committees representing any farmers. That is number 1 low-hanging fruit for the state of Montana. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a couple things I'd love to talk about that. First of all, I gotta woo you guys first before I can go woo Republicans, because that's easy for me. Or was it Hamilton? No, Florence. Florence. It was a Christmas event. We were there. They had a bunch of booths going around, and so I was kind of going, my flyers were green, and so I had a cowboy hat on. I was like, "Hi, I'm Matt Raines," and this woman took it. She's like, "Oh, you're a Republican, right?" I'm like, "No, I'm a Democrat." She's like, "Here's your flyer back," and we sat and talked for 10, 15 minutes, and she knew the bloodlines of my horses, and she knew my aunt and uncle, Birdtail Ranch. They had cows from them, and so you kind of bring those walls down. Through, my family ranch has been here since the 1920s. There's not many ranchers that haven't had some of our animals or had dealings with somebody in my family, like my grandparents. And so my family brought the first quarter horse to Montana. So there's all sorts of connections that you have those conversations. And everyone is then willing to talk about the 60-70% stuff that we're the same on. And we are. That was the one in 2019 when I was, canvassing the whole state. It was amazing everywhere I went. I'm like, why do we hate each other so much? We all want the same goddamn stuff. And so, yeah, it's the way that the media really plays that 20-30%. But a rancher is a stubborn SOB that is not going to just trust anybody walking down the street. And so that is why Tester was very successful, because they are willing to sit down and have that conversation in the first place with somebody that has been in their shoes. And it does absolutely mean a lot. And it means a lot to those modern Republicans and independent voters and even modern Democrats to know that you've been there. And 10% veterans. We know Montana's a huge veteran population. And that, if you've been to war, you've been to war, and that's an experience that, you don't have to say anything when people understand. So the other thing about the suicide thing, going back to the Argentinian beef thing, if you guys, do you remember the text that Trump sent after the Argentinian beef thing to all the ranchers and farmers? If you neutralize it and not be the ranchers and farmers, and you look at those words, think about who this message comes from. It went like this: "Hey guys, I love you, but you've messed up, and you need me in your life, and you would be nothing without me, and I need you to fix yourself because I have friends that are more important." That was the text. If you took out the rancher and farmer agenda, that was what that text said. So you asked me about suicides among ranchers and farmers. They've been in an abusive relationship. They don't know it, but they've been in an abusive relationship. And so I was down in Ennis, and they're like, how do we get in there and just pound their message into them? And you can't. You can't convince somebody in an abusive relationship when it's time for them to get out. But when it is time for them to get out, you have to be there and ready for them. And they have to trust you, and they have to want to come to you. And that is who we are as a party, as a population. We are about being there and supporting those people in need. and they're all gonna be in need when they get tired of this stuff. And the suicide rates are skyrocketing because of what they're going through. And so, yeah, it will mean a lot for us to be there with the moms when it's time. I think it's getting closer.
Yeah, I agree with you that, two of our major, priorities should be, healthcare and housing affordability. My question relates to, the fact that, here in Missoula, for example, we've spent the better part of the last 20 years trying to wrestle with the three-headed hydra that is property taxes, homelessness, and housing prices, because they all go together. And we're not seeing any coherent response to that in the city, as far as I can tell. The second thing is, I'm hearing a lot of anecdotal reports about the struggles in both community and St. Pat's here in town. They're hemorrhaging doctors. They can't pay what other places can pay them. They're hemorrhaging skilled allied trades workers, the nurses and techs. So how will you and the Democrats writ large convince the ranchers that we're talking about, the people that are sitting in coffee shops somewhere in rural western Montana, how do we convince them that we're gonna do a better job to deal with those issues than the Republicans?
So the housing side, and I mean locally, talking with Andre, like they're working on expanding it and finding more areas to put housing and stuff. And so, yeah, Pandora's box has been open. Montana is a beautiful place, and people have realized that it's fun to move to. Like we're not gonna be able to turn that off. Federally, what we can do, because we can't affect property taxes, but taxes are tied to appreciation. And so appreciation on the houses have gone up because of supply and demand. And so really being able to find housing solutions is the underlying way to fix that. Federally, Montana Premium Processing, the co-op that we started up there, I was able to get about 600,000 over a few different grants to get that thing up and going. It went from concept. There were some different grants through the ARPA funds and stuff that were available, and we had people that came in, and it was funds that were dedicated to community support, meat processing, the needs that we had. And now we have a fully functioning USDA facility that helps our ranchers and farmers. If the grant money hadn't been there, specifically earmarked for that kind of facility, then it wouldn't exist and we would still be tied to the big packing plants. And so with housing, you've got three components. You've got your land, your infrastructure, where you put the housing. You've got your materials, and you got your contractor labor to put them on. And so helping support the infrastructure. So where Missoula is trying to expand, whether city limits or just get into other areas where they put housing, we federally can help the infrastructure part of that. In terms of materials, there's not much you can do. We got some of our stuff, grants were earmarked specifically for materials. The labor side is where contractors, and this is, Whitefish and Bozeman more of an issue, but contractors will always cherry pick the mansions. Their profit margins are for the big houses. And that just whittles down, and your apartment complexes are the low hanging fruit in terms of the non valuable profit margin type properties. And so we need to federally flip that to where it's enticing to have contractors come in and bid and take these jobs to help put single family homes, multiplexes, apartment complexes up, so we can take that burden off everyone who's looking to rent right now. And so, yeah, there's not one single solution, but if you can help the supply grow, and that's what we can federally, and yeah, the example, I mean, I've lived in the grant program and it is shitty, holy crap, trying to get federal grants is not fun. And so there's lots of ways that we can clean that up and make it easier for just the Montanan that just wants to go and you know, right now, there's a huge taboo in our tax system about having rental properties. And we've gotten to a point that has opened up where corporations can come in and they've got the bankroll, they can buy up all these stuff because we pay horrendous taxes on having second homes here at our rentals. And so we can relook at that to put the power back into the individuals that want to be able to own these properties and rent them out versus these corporations that are having way too much power. Hospitals. That goes, I mean, one, Medicare, Medicaid, we have to protect that. The subsidies, that if they go away and we have people that, I mean, 70, 80,000 people lose their insurance, those will stress our hospitals to no end, and specifically the emergency rooms. They're gonna stop going to their primary care, and if they have any kind of issue, they have to go to the emergency room, otherwise they get paid for it. And so then people that have emergencies won't be able to get in there. And so, you know, if they come in with a serious issue, they have cancer, like if there's something big, somebody's gotta pay for that. And so the system that we have with insurance is shitty, but if we just take insurance away from everybody and just be like, you know, live. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, my mom taught just to make sure that we had kind of like coverage and stuff. In a small town, it was always like one parent had to have a government job. And so, but we still, my parents were so scared. My dad had all sorts of like broken bones and bumps and stuff because he would never go to the hospital because it was the fear of how much that was going to take away from our livelihood. And we're headed back in that direction where people are going to be scared to live because they might get hurt and they might get a doctor's bill that they can't afford. It's going to set them back years. I got doctored out with a vet kit way more than I probably should have as a kid. And so, yeah, I mean, we need to fix it. The universal healthcare moving that direction. I mean, that's like compass points north. That needs to like always be the goal. But we have to make sure, at least in the near term, that people can afford the insurance that they have.
One more super quick one.
I promise to answer quickly.
Would you support sales tax in Montana?
I mean, I could care less. As a politician, I know it's the most taboo thing in the world, but I mean, I've done it all. Like, I mean, the VAT tax is actually the brilliant way to do it. What Europe does, where it's all behind the scenes, and when it's on the shelf, it's already like taxes already put in there. But that is not something that I'm for. Sales tax, now that we've become such a tourist state, the logic behind it is a way to make income off all these people that are flooding our roads and facilities and stuff. And so I get the logic behind it. I absolutely love to not have a sales tax here and brag to people. It's kind of like in the military, like you're on all the basic posts, you never have sales tax. And so it's like that. Never go on record either way, because I mean, one, it's a way to get revenue. I mean,
Well, it's regressive, but if you eliminated groceries and, you know, I think
the problem with that is that's always like the ideal way at the beginning. And then who's ever in power year after year after year after year, it gets morphed into the shit never envisioned. Okay, any other questions from this side, so I don't have to turn around and leave? Okay.
All right, thank you, Matt. I don't know if anybody saw articles that came out yesterday, but Montana's first congressional district is one of 5 new races that National Democrats consider a potential flip. So there's going to be a lot more attention and energy coming into our district. We've got 4 incredible candidates running, so thank you, Matt, for being one of them and traveling the state talking to people all over because it's so important and we're ready to turn it blue. So thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break and then we will get started with our central committee meeting. Thanks.
Anyone has not signed the